And we're recording now. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, that's a good place to start. So we just established a little background around what affirming feedback is and is not. Just a little intro. We're going to get into some concrete examples and get into a real lesson and real scenarios. But I want to take this purposeful pause right now and just hear from you. What is resonating with you right now so far? Or where are you experiencing some confusion or even resistance or skepticism? Or what are you curious to know more about? Like, where are you hoping, what questions are coming to mind, or what are you excited to see or learn more? So I welcome you to put any of that in the chat or come off mute. Just gives me some direction on how is this landing so far, and if I want to tailor anything specifically to your wonderings. Just allow a little bit of time and then we'll move on if nothing comes to mind for now. Thank you, Darlene. Thank you, Kelly. Great. You want to see the protocol. Importance of going beyond compliments surface. Yes, it resonates with me that feedback should not be about compliancy. Wonderful. Thank you all. Okay, let's move forward then. Let's see some examples. I can see this coinciding with ideas behind immediate feedback as well. Oh, I would like to hear you make that connection as we move forward, Tracy. Okay, so here's kind of the template or protocol that you can follow. It's a formula, which I love giving that kind of concrete steps. So affirming feedback includes naming the strength, naming the need, and naming the next step. So you do that in a package, all in one feedback kind of blurb that you give to students. You could give that feedback in writing. You could give that feedback orally in the moment in class. You could give that feedback as you circulate during a check for understanding, as you're monitoring learning. You could give feedback like that in a one-to-one, in conferences. You can give feedback like that to your friends, to your partner, to other people in your lives. This is described in more detail in this article in Edutopia that will be linked in the slides when you get them later. Okay, so I'm going to show you this in action. We're gonna dive into a sixth grade lesson. I'm going to have you take a minute. This is from Fish Tank curriculum that's available for free online. So if you wanted to look more into this lesson later, you could. I'm going to have you read the text-based question that's at the top. It's the key question. It's from The Outsiders, S.C. Hinton's novel. And I want you to read the sample response that comes with the curriculum. Okay, and then I'm going to have you think about one um, criteria, that what would you be listening for as you hear students' responses in real time as the sixth grade teacher? I meant to animate that and not have the criteria visible. Anyway, to save time, those are some examples of what you might listen for as students answer this question, either in small groups or with a think, pair, share partner, or maybe you're at the stage where they're actually drafting a written response. But yeah, so I'm going to give you a minute to just read the question, read the sample response, anchor in the standard. That's the grade level goal that we're getting at, um, and look at the criteria for success. So take a minute and do that. Okay. All right, so just a quick recap there in case for any reason you couldn't read it or you're multitasking. The standard for the lesson is around explaining how the author develops the point of view of the narrator or speaker in a text. And the key question from the curriculum is around specific pages in The Outsiders and what they reveal about Cherry's perspective of greasers and how Ponyboy's perspective compares to hers. It's asking for examples from the text. So really, the criteria for success there, the what you would listen for. This is a response. It's a sample. It's not, the only way to answer that question. But what the real sort of core understanding you want students to get from that is how Ponyboy shares Cherry's view that greasers are more emotional than socks, and that that's ultimately a good thing because they feel real, authentic emotions, and the socks are too caught up in looking and presenting a certain way that they feel kind of numb. But Ponyboy differs in a very unique way because he's had this lived experience with greasers to know that true, raw, authentic emotion actually also leads to violence, and that he feels like they need more balance in the emotion that they feel. So you'd really be listening for, do they understand, do they get that key difference? While the similarity would be something more students may observe. You may also listen for, compare and contrast language, like while, however, at the same time. Okay, so let's do an example of what a student might say in class. So here's a sample student response. Cherry and Ponyboy think greasers are better than socks. That's right, they are. Socks are fake. So maybe you had a turn and talk and students were answering it in this way. Or maybe you had equity sticks or volunteers or cold calling or warm calling, and a student says this when they raise their hand. So let's practice that, or let me show you an example of what the affirming feedback structure might look like. So step one, we name the strength. You're noticing that Cherry expresses a preference for how greasers act compared to how socks act, and that Ponyboy agrees. So, one way, and again, this isn't the only way you might do the strength, but you're pulling out a strength they did related to the success criteria. Like they did get something right from what we're listening for and looking for in the response. And you're being really specific about what they got. Okay, so the next step is, what's the need here? Be more specific than fake. What is fake about how the socks act versus how the greasers act? Right? So, like, fake could mean a lot of different things. That wasn't a word from the text. We want to get at the idea about their emotions being numb or artificial, superficial, things like that. So we're really pushing for precision from the text there. And the other key criteria missing was there was no discussion of how Ponyboy's view is different. So also, how does Ponyboy's view differ from Cherry's? You got how it's the same. The next step. Reread page 33 and underline details about the socks being fake. Highlight how Ponyboy's view differs from Cherry's. Okay, so the idea here is the strength, the need, the next step. So, like Zaretta Hammond, you're being honest about the gap and you're providing feedback that actually makes the path forward concrete and visible. You're giving that next step. So if you're the student now and you gave that response, I want you to think about, how does this kind of feedback differ from what maybe you habitually or often give to students when you hear answers coming at you in class, or you're circulating and listening to turn and talks, or what you observe from other teachers if you're in a coaching or leadership role, or even thinking back to feedback you've experienced in your job, or when you were a student. And then think about, well, what would be the impact on that student, who gave that answer? Do they think it's just okay and good to go and like, yeah, I got this? Or do they feel like, oh, yeah, I'm on the right track and I know where I need to go next? I mean, it is going to be their choice now to take that next step, of course. But the path and the opportunity is there. It's visible, it's named, it's structured, and you're there to support it. Okay. here's a practice opportunity. Different question. I'm not giving you all the context of the lesson and all that. We don't necessarily need that right now. Um, Thank you. Yes, Kelly. Yeah. Assessment for learning. Yeah. And that was really a check for understanding. Like those key questions in the fish tank curriculum are really the ones that help you check for understanding with the standard. Let me just go back. This is so slow. I don't really need to go all the way back now. Um, shouldn't have started this. Now it's slowing down. Okay, yeah. Yeah, it was a check for understanding to monitor progress with the learning goal for sure. And yeah, and I think like you would be really strategic about when you give this sort of three-step feedback chunk to a student. You don't necessarily do it with every response, right? Sometimes you may just name the strength. Sometimes you can jump to the next step. Like it just depends where you are in the lesson and in the process. And I want to speak to the real, very real situation Stephen brought up in the chat with his centered student, who is resistant and disappointed in their schooling, is online, doesn't want to share in class. So it's hard to find those connection points. And so just a reminder too, like this can look like a one-on-one. This could look like feedback in writing on something the student submits. I would just say that it packs such a big punch and effect that even if you feel like, well, he barely ever turns anything in, or like I never get I know I can't get one-on-one time with him. I have 30 students in my class. It's like if you get one-on-one time with him and for 3 minutes, over the course of a month, there's still such a powerful impact that it has on a student's like ability to disrupt the narrative they have in their head of themselves as a learner, that it's worth doing it. It's worth doing that, even though that one time and sort of building on that. Now you have something you can build on and anchor in. And I welcome anyone else to give ideas you're thinking of too for Stephen in the chat or bring up other issues that come up in the chat. Okay, I want to go to that next example. Okay. So this is an opportunity for you to practice. So if you have a scratch piece of paper, I'd love for you to write the refined feedback that follows the three-step process. Okay, so let's say we ask a question. This is more of a lower elementary situation. How did Horace use his big hands? Give 2 to 3 specific examples. And that was like maybe a question taken straight from a curriculum. Student response. Horace has really big hands. They're so big. Teacher teacher response. This is something we see maybe more typically. Yes, you're right. Thank you. Awesome. Who else can add on to this idea? So that's a very common type of response we might see in a classroom. And sometimes we wouldn't even bat an eye. And it's not that it's bad, it's just that it's a missed opportunity. With that same amount of talking and with that same amount of time, we can make a much bigger shift for the student by focusing on a strength, a need, and a next step. So take a moment and just try to practice that on your own, and we'll compare our answers or our ideas because there's no one way this can look. Okay, I would love to see some ideas in the chat. Uh, I'm getting them already. Okay. Can you tell me the adjectives the author used that help us know Horace's hands are huge? Can you show me how the illustrator shows us his hands are huge? Okay, so what that example Gretchen put in the chat, is that naming the strength? Is that giving the need? Is that giving the next step? Those are great follow-up questions. Um, But in terms of our process, just sort of practicing like opening with what did the student get right? What could we say here? I see Tracy's example. Yes, you understood that he had big hands. Strength. Can you think of how he used them? Think back to what those big hands were good for in our story. Okay, so that's what's missing. That's the need. The next step, go back into our text and highlight those examples that help you understand how his hands were so useful. Yes. Great. And both of those are strong examples. And I'm going to show the one I drafted, and I just want us to see like there's different ways that this can look, and you should certainly personalize it with your style and language. Thank you so much for reminding us that Nathan does have big hands. But remember, our question is about how he uses his hands. So there's the need. Let's reread page 6 to see how he is using his big hands. Okay, so I think all those three really are elevating what the response was as the default that we saw here. All of them have in common that they give the student a direction forward. The thing about affirming feedback is that we really want to anchor in what was strong, what the student offered. And that can be challenging sometimes to find that in an answer that feels like it's not meeting any of the sort of listed success criteria, right? Um, Okay, do I have another one here from Kelly? You notice that the story tells us his hands are big. Since the question asks about what he does with them, can you find picture or words that shows what he does with those hands? Nice and concise, similar to the one I ended up coming up with too. Okay, I see so many strengths and variation and how this can look in the chat. Thank you for participating. Here's a couple more examples. And again, I'm not giving you the full lesson context, but hopefully this is helpful. This is like when you need to name a strength that you feel like what the student is giving you is, it feels a little like your instinct would be like, that's not it. Like we're way off track here. Or like, that's not what I'm getting at. It's not what the question's asking. Like, and I want us to open up our like rooting back in Goldie Muhammad's description of genius and really find like what are things about a student's identity that we can bring in and validate as part of our strength. The way you described the character's feelings in your short story was so powerful. You've clearly used your gift of empathy to imagine what it would feel like to be in their shoes, making the story feel very real. Next, try to communicate the specific feeling you were trying to convey in that scene. Look back at your descriptions and replace the vague words with specific ones. So there was a gap here in terms of the emotion feeling a little vague. There is some feeling there, but we're can't really name it, or we need more precise language. So that was the need, that was the gap. And the next step is go and look at all of your descriptions and replace any vague words with specific ones. But really validating that student's like sense of empathy to be able to come up with this scenario from the beginning. I noticed how you used vibrant colors and shading in your science diagram of the water cycle. It's clear you're bringing your art skills to this assignment, or maybe I say your interest in art or your passion for drawing and your yeah, your perspective on color. And it's helping you understand and show the process in a detailed and memorable way. Next, how can you show the details of evaporation? So maybe there was a big piece of the water cycle missing. So the next step, review the definition of evaporation and the examples on page 24. Um, So we could do examples all day. I think really the idea here is that you're pushing yourself to include that strength as you open your feedback to a student, and you're opening up your concept of what that strength can be. Like, can I validate something about this student's multilingual background? Can I validate something about this student's hobbies that I've learned, or something about what their, unique life experience has contributed to this? And it can be challenging. It's just a matter of trying it, and it knowing that this is your goal. You'll start to look for those things more in your students, knowing that it's important that you name them. So once you start looking for them more, you'll start finding them more as well. And it's not something you'll know tomorrow or Monday, right? But it's like setting you up for, okay, that I'm starting a journey of discovery here for my students. What are those unique gifts and talents and areas of genius that we all do bring to our learning? Okay, some reflection time. How does affirming feedback that names a student's strength, need, and next step help them take ownership of their learning? Thank you for being so active and engaged in the chat. I look forward to seeing your response to this. Thank you, Tracy. I think it gives them a start to a success point and helps them learn how to refine their own contributions in a positive way. Stacy, I think we often take what is given by a student and ask others to add to it. Yep, that's why I put that example there. I'm in classes all over, traveling around, and it's so common. And I did it. And again, it's not bad, right? It's even something we're supposed to do, is like show how the classroom is a community of learners and we help each other and we add to each other's, right? But how often are we doing that versus giving each student the opportunity to grow and carry that cognitive load, right? And when we see another student do it, is it actually creating this culture of we're all learners, or is it, oh, I got off the hook there, or oh, my answer was good enough, we're just adding to it? Or like they're what are they really get the kid who said the first thing, like what is he really um believing from that? Yeah, thank you for naming that. Yeah, we often take what is given by a student and ask others to add to it, but this process really helps individual student reach the meaning. So well said. And Gretchen, I think you are direct messaging me, so I'm gonna read your comment out to everyone. Specific feedback validates the learner and engages them in refining their thinking. So well articulated. Thank you all. Okay. So centering our students, that same student from before, how will you affirm the student going into Monday's class if you are a classroom teacher, or in any interaction you have with that student if you're a leader, an admin, or another role in a school? What language will you use? How would receiving affirming feedback impact that student's identity as a learner? Okay, so I would love to hear what is coming up for you about that specific student. You can keep that private, or if something's coming to mind, um, we want to really, none of this is useful if it just sits in a PD slide deck, right? So like this is about what could transfer look like, and I want to thought partner with you. I don't have, obviously all the answers or anything, but we have a group of people here who are committed PD learners, teachers, people who care about our students. We're here on 9 a.m. on a Saturday, so we can thought partner a little bit together with our last chunk of time.
I'm a second grade teacher in North Clackamas, and I would love, even though I've been teaching forever, I would love to hear everybody's ideas on how I could use strengths, needs, and next step to get my students who do a lot of text to self reflection to make it more text to text reflection.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. Second grade, you said? Yeah.
Yes.
Can you maybe come up with a little scenario, like something they're reading and what they might say? Or like I'm thinking oh, go ahead.
Here's a perfect example.
Hmm.
We recently read Jabari Jumps, you know,
Hmm.
and um, and to anchor them in the story, I think I asked, does anybody here have a has it does do raise your hands if you have ever swam in a pool, you know? So they all swam in a pool. And then from there it just became, oh, I swim in a pool. I go to the community center. I've been to Wings and Waves, you know, a lot of text to self, and then a lot of just swimming talk, and
Then getting back into the text.
getting
Yeah.
back into the text. So maybe I just set that one up a little poorly, which happens from time to time. But yeah, getting them back into the story. Sometimes I'm uh, struggle.
Yeah, I love hearing you just self-reflect on your own scenario and really pinpoint the core thing. Like they did what they were asked, you know? Like I think they did what you asked really well. Like not only did they answer your question about have you been to a pool, but they elaborated wings and waves, like specifics, enthusiasm, so there's a lot to affirm there. And they met the success criteria for that question, I would say, right? So no feedback really needed there. Like I think what you're talking about is like, okay, taking that enthusiasm and now transitioning to actual text dependent questions, something that can't be answered without returning to the text. They can't just make it up. They can't answer it with something from their own life. So, like a strong text dependent question. And that's usually what our high quality instructional materials or, professional curriculum has prepared for us. Like in the example I showed from the outsiders, is like you'll usually get those questions ready to go. And the ones we sort of add in that may not be in the curriculum are like what you did, which was a good move, like this wants me to just get right into the text right away. These second graders, 8 a.m. in the morning, like, let me just do a quick connection. Like, have you guys even been to a pool? This is an opportunity for me to just learn what their prior background is. So I think that was a good move. And you named it. Like they weren't in the text because they didn't need to be. Um, what are some other wonderings happening here? Stacy, would you recommend planning this out for one student as a way to practice this process? Well, I didn't. Yes, I think that's a great idea, Stacy. Like start small, like even with the student you centered today. And with like Steven's kind of challenging scenario, like, okay, I have a student who's pretty disengaged. Like, well, does he turn in anything in writing? Is there a one-to-one opportunity you could kneel down? Where, they're getting independent think time. Tell me what you're thinking, John, whatever his name is, and start your feedback cycle from what they're giving you. Sometimes it's just, yeah, yeah, maybe just pick. And I've heard this strategy before. It's like the 2 by 10 or something like to build relationships with students, right? Just like pick two students that you talk to. I'm gonna mix this up, 2 by 5 by 10 or whatever. But the idea is like start small and just like I'm gonna pick two students for 2 weeks that I talk to 5 times, for 1 minute and see where I'm at the end of those 2 weeks. Like, what have I learned about that student? What is our relationship like now? Yeah, and you could for this say like in my class, I'm gonna give feedback to one student using this model. Um, and I like what Stacy's saying about planning this out. So going back to, let me get out of screen share mode, and just go into the deck here. Like coming back to this, right? This is work that would have been done in lesson planning, right? Like the teacher is reading, takes the question from the curriculum, has read the sample response, and internalized, like, what am I listening for and looking for when students answer this? You can't really name a next step or a need, or even a strength unless you really know, like, what are the criteria for grade level, work here. Like the idea here is to stay on grade level and give them a process to get to grade level responses. So yeah, that work does live in intentional planning. So good call out there. Yeah, Stephen, smart goals around interaction building seems clever. Yeah, great. Looks like we're going to get kicked out here. So really, really appreciate